Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep on something, you see it everywhere, right? Like those donate here buttons.
Yeah.
Generosity. But we're going way beyond that. It's a whole different approach. We're going to see how the early church, they really put this into practice.
Yeah, they did it in ways that might just, they might surprise you. It's pretty radical.
For sure.
The stuff we're looking at today are excerpts from a sermon series. It was called Beyond. And, even the title kind of tells you, right? We're not just talking about dropping some change in a donation box.
Right, exactly. So what was so different back then? the Book of Acts. Like, it describes them sharing everything, even selling their stuff to help people in need. Was this just like some ideal world kind of thing, or was there something more to it?
Well, it definitely wasn't like some, like a romanticized commune or something. You got to think about what was going on back then. Persecution, all that pressure to give up their faith, and real economic hardship.
Yeah.
But they still chose to share, even when it meant giving up something themselves. And the thing is, this radical generosity, it wasn't just like a one-time thing.
Yeah.
It was baked into their community, like how they understood faith.
That's what I find so interesting. It wasn't just about giving extra. It was a whole different way of thinking.
Yeah.
Acts 2 specifically.
Mm-hmm.
All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. What made it possible for them to live that way?
Well, part of it was this idea of koinonia.
Okay.
It's Greek, and it usually gets translated as fellowship, but it's way more than that.
Okay.
Koinonia means this really deep shared life.
Yeah.
A unity that goes way beyond just hanging out together.
Yeah.
They shared resources, supported each other, and really got at that their own well-being was tied to everyone else in the community.
So it was like a total change in perspective. From me to we, from getting ahead on your own to everyone doing well together. That's powerful stuff, especially now when everything's so focused on the individual.
For sure. That's why the early church is such a challenge to us,
Yeah.
It makes us ask ourselves, how connected are we really, to our communities? Are we willing to put others first, even if it means getting out of our comfort zones or going against what everyone else is doing?
Totally. And that brings up another interesting point. Giving in the Corinthian church.
Right.
Corinth was this, this huge commercial center, famous for its wealth and, let's be honest, its excesses.
Oh, yeah.
But the source points out that not everyone was rich. There was a lot of disparity, rich and poor. How did that affect the church?
Well, imagine a church with wealthy merchants right alongside day laborers and even slaves.
Oh, yeah.
The potential for problems was huge. Paul, in his letters to them, he's always dealing with these tensions. He's pushing them to be unified, especially in supporting the believers in Jerusalem who were struggling. So it wasn't just about being generous locally. It was about reaching beyond their own little group.
So Paul was challenging them to think bigger.
Exactly.
About generosity that went beyond geography, not just about your neighbor or your social circle.
Oh, yeah. He even compares them to the Macedonian churches. They were super poor themselves, but they gave more than they could afford, way more. It shows that generosity isn't about how much you have, it's about how willing you are to give.
Yeah.
The spirit of it, the commitment, even if it seems small.
Yeah, it totally changes how we think about giving. It's not about waiting till we have enough left over. It's realizing that even small things can make a difference when we all do it together.
And that's where this beyond ourselves idea really comes in. Real generosity isn't just a one-time thing. It's how you live.
Yeah.
It's growing that giving spirit, sharing, going above and beyond what you think you can do.
So why, though? Why live that way? What's the motivation? The theological basis for this radical generosity?
That's where things get really interesting. We need to understand the early church, how they saw God and their place in the world.
So we saw that the early church, they were really serious about generosity. But what was behind it? Was it just a cultural thing? Or was there something deeper, some theological reason?
Oh, it was definitely connected to how they understood God.
Okay.
They saw him as the ultimate giver.
Yeah.
The source of everything, life, provision, abundance. And it wasn't just some idea, it was woven into how they saw creation, history, their own lives.
So it wasn't just about giving back to God because you had to. It was more reflecting his character.
Right, reflecting his generosity.
Yeah.
And the source brings up this Hebrew idea of tzedakah. It usually gets translated as charity or righteousness, but it's way more than that. It implies this responsibility to take care of people in need, to make society fair and just, to be part of God's work of healing the world.
So it's not just giving out of pity, it's about working to make a world where everyone has what they need to thrive.
Exactly. And that's where this beyond ourselves theme really comes in. It's about realizing that our resources, time, talents, they're not just for us. They're gifts to share to help others, to make a real difference.
It's a big ask, though, right? Especially in a culture that's all about success and getting ahead.
Yeah, it's like we're being called to completely change our values.
Yeah.
2 Corinthians 9:8, where Paul talks about God's abundance. Not just enough to get by, but overflowing generosity.
So it's not just meeting basic needs, it's about having more than enough to share with others.
And this abundance isn't just about money either. It's about the fullness of life that comes from being right with God and with each other.
So true generosity isn't about losing something, it's actually gaining something.
Right. It's like this source of life, joy, abundance that flows into everything.
Yeah. This goes on to look at some verses that paint a picture of what living beyond ourselves looks like day to day.
Yeah.
This is where I get excited, connecting these big ideas to real life.
One that really gets me is 1 Peter 4:10. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms.
So we're called to be good stewards of everything we have. Time, talents, resources. Not holding on to them, but using them to help others.
Yeah, and that service looks different for everyone.
Right.
It also looks at Philippians 2:3-4, which talks about humility, putting others first.
Yeah.
And Romans 12:1-3 about hospitality. Not just inviting people over, but really sharing ourselves and what we have with those in need.
So it's about making space for others, really welcoming them, going beyond just being polite.
Right. And maybe most importantly, 1 John, the call to go beyond words and really put love into action. True generosity isn't just a feeling, it's what you do. It means giving something, making a real difference in someone's life.
That's a challenge. It's easy to just think about being generous, but this is about actually doing something.
Yeah, putting your faith into action. And that's where the beyond ourselves idea goes from just an idea to real life. And that's what we'll talk about in the last part. The practical step, the challenges, and the amazing rewards that come with living this way.
All right. So we've talked about the early church and Tzedakah and all those verses about living beyond ourselves.
Right.
But the question is, how do we actually do it in real life?
Yeah. It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed, right? Like it's all too much.
Yeah.
But the source reminds us that generosity doesn't have to be these huge things. I can start small. Just being willing to look beyond our own needs and see the needs of others.
So it's about being aware of the people around us. But how do we do that practically? Life gets busy. It's easy to miss those opportunities.
Start with the people you see every day.
Okay.
Your neighbors, coworkers, the people at the store or the gym. What are they dealing with? What are their struggles? Could you lend a hand or just listen?
It's about looking outward, asking, how can I help? But sometimes people don't always show their struggles, do they?
Not always.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might be hurting, but put on a brave face.
Yeah.
So it's easy to miss it.
Right.
Practice compassion. Really see and feel the needs of others.
Yeah.
Even when they're not saying it out loud. Ask questions. Be present in conversations. Make it safe for them to open up.
So create a space for connection, to be vulnerable, to remember that we're all human. It's not about prying into their lives, just being there, listening, offering support however we can.
And that support can look different for everyone. It might be something small. Offering to babysit, helping with groceries, sending a card to someone who's down. It doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. Sometimes the little things mean the most.
It's about those everyday moments, those little chances to make a difference. But what about the bigger challenges? When the needs are huge and we feel like we don't have enough, where do we even start?
That's where trust comes in. God provides limitlessly.
Right.
He doesn't ask us to do things without giving us what we need. It might feel scary to step out in faith, to give when we feel like we don't have enough. But that's what beyond ourselves is all about.
Letting go of fear, of thinking there's not enough, remembering that God's provision isn't limited by what we have. He can take what little we offer and do amazing things.
And as we step out, we see that promise come true.
Right.
Generosity doesn't drain us. It actually fills us up.
Right.
As we give to others, we find ourselves being filled in ways we never expected.
So it's not giving till it hurts. It's giving till it heals. For everyone involved. Letting God's love flow through us to touch the lives of those around us.
And when we do that, we experience the rewards of generosity. It talks about the spiritual growth, the joy, the deeper relationships that come from living this way.
We're not just individuals, you know. We're all connected. Our actions matter. When we choose generosity, we're helping to create a better world.
A more compassionate world. And maybe most important, we learn that generosity isn't a burden. It's a gift. A chance to show God's love, to make a difference, to be changed by giving.
That's a great way to end our deep dive. Generosity isn't a one-time thing, it's a way of life. It's about looking beyond ourselves and seeing the needs of others. And when we do that, the rewards are incredible.
It really is. I encourage you to think about this more. Try putting these ideas into practice and see the joy that comes from living beyond yourselves.
Thanks for joining us today, and until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep living beyond yourselves.